Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, I think we should first say that because of practical reasons, we're having to record this on the Tuesday, just before the England game. So if Everton are sold tomorrow to a large consortium led by Tyson Fury, I'm afraid we won't be covering that news until Sunday. So fingers crossed that won't happen. Or the Everton fans may say fingers crossed that will happen. Before we get into the news, Kieran, the important thing that people are wondering, what's the news on the Baroness? How's the ice bath routine? Is she up and running?
Yeah, the ice bath combined with English sparkling wine has proven to be very successful. She's bouncing around. She's still giving it the, if I ever suggest doing that again, remind me of the state my feet are currently in. But yeah, no, she's good. Thank you. And again, thank you to everybody for the amazing support and the kind words. Yeah. It's very, very humbling.
I'm guessing that's drinking the English sparkling wine, Kieran, rather than Cleopatra style, adding it to the bath.
Yes. Well, Waitrose prices, absolutely.
It's blinking expensive, isn't it? It's Newsday, Kieran, and I would say it's a slow news week, but that's only by comparison because the stories we've had are fairly big ones. And I want to start, Kieran, with an update on ticket pricing stories. We spoke about Villa fans being, understandably so, upset about the pricing for upcoming Champions League game against big teams. Not upset enough that it hasn't sold out, obviously, which it's always going to do. But there has been a response from Villa to the anger of Villa fans. And it comes from their president of business operations, who goes by the name of Chris Heck, which is a fantastic Simpsons boss name, isn't it? You can just imagine Homer walking into a meeting where it's being chaired by Chris Heck, whose friends call him, what the? But Chris Heck, has been a strong response from Villa, decently worded. It starts by saying we recognise and understand the depth of passion felt amongst fans about this issue, etc., etc. It goes on to say, achieving our sporting ambitions while complying with financial stability regulations requires difficult decisions, and that's understandable, it's fair enough. But the bit I'm interested in, Kieran, this is when it comes down to justifying the price increase. It says FFP rules prohibit owners from covering shortfalls to finance this ambition, so we need to generate as much revenue as possible through sponsorship, merchandise and ticket sales to ensure we can keep the club where we rightfully belong, competing and winning at the top of English and European football. So basically what they're saying is if it was down to us, we'd let you in for nothing. But those pesky FFP rules mean we can't subsidise you in any way, shape or form. And it means that ticket sales are one of our biggest sources of income. So we have to rinse you as much as possible. Have I got that right, Kieran?
That's right. And expect this narrative to come from many clubs over the forthcoming months and years. FFP, PSR, whatever you want to call it, the cost control rules, were introduced by club owners because they were losing money. And this was seen as one vehicle through which those losses could be reduced. Now, admittedly, those rules were introduced under a different ownership regime at Aston Villa. But I think part of the problem that we have is that the Premier League TV deal is showing no growth. So therefore, clubs are looking for other income streams. FFP is the perfect get out of jail free card. If you do anything that the fans don't like, I don't want to do it, it's down to FFP. Manchester United with car park charges, putting up the price of a pint. Everything will now be blamed on FFP. And I'm not a fan of the cost control rules because I think they distort competitive balance for ambitious clubs such as Aston Villa and Newcastle. And I've said this, and I actually wrote this, and I'm not claiming anything here. I wrote this in the first edition of the Price of Football book in 2019. Funnily enough, nobody picked up on it at the time because nobody gave a damn. It's only when it affects your club, then all of a sudden the moral high ground is being taken on. So there are flaws with the cost control rules. Football doesn't actually have a problem in terms of generating money. Football is brilliant at generating money. What football has a problem with is spending money.
Yeah.
Because I know I've said this before, since the creation of the Premier League, and Aston Villa were a founding member of the Premier League, and I've got no issue with that whatsoever. I think it's a fantastic product. Revenues have gone up by 2,800%. That's 20 times faster than general inflation. So that's absolutely brilliant. At the same time, wages have gone up by 3,800%. So, to say to fans, because of our inability as executives and owners of the club, because of our inability to have decent cost control, and I also defend players' wages. I work for the PFA. I'm quite honest in that, and I always defend wages. But nobody forces the clubs to pay the level of wages that they're currently committing themselves to. They volunteer these contracts. They commit themselves to very, very generous executive pay as well, it has to be said. So to use cost control as a way out to justify these prices, and as somebody from an economics background, if Villa can sell out all tickets at £97 a throw, then charge £97 a throw. And that's what economics says. You'd have paid a huge amount to see Taylor Swift and the Foo Fighters, and we all know what's happening with a couple of Mancunians, one of whom might have a very expensive divorce to pay for, which might have brought him back into the brotherly love in terms of ticket prices there. And people are so impressed by that. And look, it's Aston Villa versus Bayern Munich as well. Yeah, an iconic match for any Villa fan. And also I'd just like to send out best wishes to Gary Shaw, because I think he's Stan was saying that he's a bit poorly at present. Yeah. So a fantastic player that when you were growing up, you wanted to be Gary Shaw because he just looked so cool and he was a great goal scorer. So that's where we are. I think it's a little bit disingenuous of the club to say, well, the ticket prices would have been lower apart from PSR. It's not. It's a convenient excuse which expect to see repeated ad nauseum. Owners of clubs could change the rules if they wanted, although even if you change the Premier League rules, the UEFA rules are far more onerous. I think that would be more of a challenge. If you take a look at Project Picture, if you take a look at Super League, the equivalent of PSR was far, far harsher, because those particular schemes were purely aimed at shifting money away from players into the pockets of owners.
Gary Shaw is also the reason why my dear, dear friend Gaz is called Gaz. Because as a young man, even though we're all Palace fans, you couldn't help but admire that Villa team. And my mate Gaz, a.k.a. Andrew, a.k.a. Stan, loved Gary Shaw, but looked nothing like Gary Shaw, and indeed played nothing like Gary Shaw. So, of course, we started to call him Gary Shaw, and he's been called Gaz ever since. Kieran, I'm shocked at your cynicism at suggesting that Oasis might be coming back on tour merely to pay some divorce payment. Kieran, it might be that they need to get a space in the car park at Man City, which doesn't come cheap these days for anyone. Who knows? There's also, I don't know if this is quite right, but there's Oasis leads us to dynamic pricing, which everyone's talking about at the moment. And there is an element of this because Villa, quite rightly, were fairly confident the Villa fans would pay top dollar to see their club pay some of the best teams in Europe. If Palace were to get into the UEFA Conference League and we were playing the champions of Malta, I think I would pay whatever it took to get into Selhurst Park to see that game, because it would be such a significant thing. So Villa probably knew they were going to be getting criticism, but they also knew they were going to be selling out every single seat for every single game in the Champions League.
That's right. Football, what is so great about football is that it creates shared experiences and memories that last forever. Yeah, and I'm not reading here from a marketeer's playbook. That's how I feel as a football fan. We've had this discussion before. You list the top 10 moments of your life, and how many of those for you involve Palace? How many of those for me involve Brighton and so on? We love our wives. We remember birth of our kids and all that type of thing. But football's pretty much there. And that's the same for Villa fans, and therefore the opportunity to see Aston Villa play Bayern Munich, the club will feel vindicated. Villa fans have grumbled, but they paid. And, big bad wolf, the pantomime villain is going to be PSR from now on.
I mean, that question about top 10 best moments, Kieran, it very much depends on whether it's Gaz asking me in the Parsons or Ali asking me in a restaurant on our anniversary. I mean, I'd probably have two different answers, I guess, Kieran. Having said that Villa, Kieran, were confident they would sell these tickets, our second story takes us to a massive club in European football where the opposite is happening.
Well, that's right, because what we have with the new formation of the Champions League is, I think is it an extra 180 games to reduce 36 clubs in a competition to 24. It's very, very bloated. And this is Milan. And Milan are a European giant. And again, you and I, we can recall the success of that club historically and some of the amazing players that they've had, then and now. But what Milan have done is they've got Liverpool coming next week or two, and tickets that they would normally charge €59 for, they're charging 139. If you want to go in the family stand, it's €129 per member of the family.
Wow.
Mum, dad, and 2 kids, you're talking €520. That's 450 quid to see a match which you can watch on telly. And funnily enough, the tickets aren't selling. So is this an indication that Milan fans are more discerning? Is this an indication that there's a bit of an economic malaise taking place in Europe and the UK at present, and that some people are now starting to prioritise how they spend their money? And they'd like to see football, but not at these prices. So I think it's an interesting situation that we have, in that clubs are testing the water. And if it was a semi-final, I suspect fans would pay that. But for a group game, one of 8 group games, you'd probably think, oh, watch this one on the telly. Yeah, I'd like to see Liverpool. I can still watch it on the telly. And I'll go to some of the other home games. I do think that the football industry, we've said that an advantage that Premier League clubs have is that they have large tourist fan bases, which has meant a change in pricing structure, the marginalisation of season ticket holders, senior fans, disabled fans, young fans, and so on. But that's not necessarily true across the rest of Europe.
It's funny, isn't it, how as a kid, those European teams, they just seem so far away and so glamorous. So the likes of Benfica and Ajax and AC Milan in particular was so iconic for me as a kid, to the extent that the first time I actually went to see AC Milan, I nearly cried when I first went into the San Siro. But as a mate of mine pointed out at the time, that's partly down to the tear gas, because it was all kicking off. Didn't quite realise how robust Italian police could be in terms of our local Croydon bobbies. There's an international break this weekend, Kieran, and I think that's one reason why this story went slightly under the radar. I know that's a phrase I use a lot recently, and I don't know whether I'm being paranoid and thinking that clubs are deliberately releasing this information when people are looking elsewhere. But in the same way we saw at Palace recently, the owners going, I'm buying you, no, you're not, I'm buying you. We've seen at Chelsea both sides, both the major owners, suggesting that they want to be the only owners of the club, and resisting the other side's suggestion that they want to be the only owners of the club as well. And it's not turned out into outright civil war yet, Kieran, but it's some of the language there again was quite on the nose.
Yes, if you look at relationships which don't work, especially sort of when they've been going a couple of years or more, what does it normally revolve around? Normally revolves around, in my view, 3 things: money, kids, and the house.
Spreadsheets as well in your spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets in my case, yes. Yeah. True. That I can sort of comes on the money, just about. And this is the issue in respect of Chelsea Football Club. The present situation is that there is an organisation called Clearlake Capital, which owns 61% of the shares. And then there's Todd Boehly and his 2 silent partners who own 39%. And everybody focuses on the number of shares. But I've said that similar to the situation that we have at Crystal Palace, similar to the situation that we have Manchester United, people need to start ignoring the number of shares and to look at the rights that these shareholders have. And although there is an imbalance in the proportion of shares owned between Clearlake and Boehly and his chums, in terms of decision-making, they are equal partners. And it's the same at Palace. John Textor is moaning. He's got quarter control. He's got 1 vote when it comes to decision-making. And other people have got votes as well, which has created some of his angst. What's gone wrong at Chelsea is that the club has spent an awful lot of money. in terms of transfer spend. That has not yet generated a return on the investment. And you've got Todd Boehly and his mates, and for them is a bit of a fun exercise. He's been very successful in his own business. He's been very successful in his US franchise sports. He wants it to work. Of course, he wants it to work, but he's in no hurry to make a return on his investment. Clearlake Capital are an investment fund. They look after the money of high net worth individuals who don't give a stuff about soccer ball. They just say to Clearlake, we give you our money, you take a commission, you invest that money on our behalf, we want a return on it. And Clearlake, therefore, are under a different type of pressure because they are probably looking at a return in a much shorter time horizon. So things haven't worked out in terms of recruitment. By all accounts, Todd Boehly effectively handed over the recruitment arm part of things. Remember, he's a man with a huge ego. He appointed himself sporting director of a sport where he felt that the 4-4-3 formation was very much underrated. We can't criticise him because he's the billionaire and we're the two old blokes having a moan. So, he's good at what he does, whatever we say. So he's not being involved in that, but the money still is being spent. The other issue, I said money, kids. Well, the kids are the players, and that has been hit and miss. And then it comes to your property, and the two parties cannot agree as to what is the appropriate next step. Do they go for a redevelopment of Stamford Bridge? They have a bit more land around there now, but that is going to be expensive in terms of development because for people not familiar with Chelsea Football Club, it's in the most expensive area of the most expensive city in Europe. So therefore, any ancillary costs are going to be very, very high. It also means that as an institution, you've got neighbours who happen to be incredibly wealthy. And the last thing that they want is the idea of a building site for a football ground, which is going to be much higher than it has been historically. And therefore, that's going to be blocking out light. There's going to be traffic, infrastructure issues to go along with that. There's going to be objections. So that could be an issue. The alternative to expanding Stamford Bridge is to go to Earl's Court or somewhere similar. That would cause issues from the perspective of Chelsea football fans. And remember, we've had somebody from Chelsea pitch owners on the show who said, actually, we effectively own the name of Chelsea Football Club. And if they want to go to Earl's Court, we might have one or two objections to that. And if they want to go and set up a football club there, they can't necessarily call it Chelsea. So there are a lot of complications involved. And the two parties are just about on speaking terms. But this story was broken by Bloomberg, David Hellier, and I know David quite well. David's a Chelsea fan himself, and I know he's done an awful lot of background on this. And I think he stands by the story, and it looks as if that's been backed up by other journalists who have started to investigate as well.
I've got a 3-part question for you, Kieran, off the back of that, or as Ali would probably prefer me to say, I have 3 one-part questions off the back of that for you. First of all, is this one of those rare situations where both parties could actually afford to buy each other out? Secondly, you talk about the time issue in Clearlake Capital wanting a return on their investment quicker than Boehly. Would that explain why Todd Boehly was saying, I want to stay because I think this project could take 25 years? Thirdly, given that they do seem to be at each other's throats a little bit, why did I get the impression when they first bought the club that Clearlake and Boehly were inseparable, that they were part of the same, that this was an equal deal, rather? Because that's certainly how it was sold to us and to Chelsea fans as well. It seemed to be, Boehly was going to be the front of house man, but it seemed that they all had the same amount of money involved and they all had the same long-term plan for the club.
Fair questions. Let me deal with them in turn. With regards to both parties being in the position to buy each other out, I think that should not prove to be too much of a problem. Chelsea cost £2.5 billion. Clearlake, that's small change,
right, okay,
as far as they're concerned. Right. They are a very, very wealthy fund. And I think we fall into the trap because football is so central to our lives and the lives of the vast majority of fans in this country, of thinking that football is a big industry it's not. If we take a look at Chelsea going for £2.5 billion, Microsoft bought a company called Activision, which makes Call of Duty and other video games. It paid 20 times the amount and this is for a video games company, and that deal went through, and that just made zero impact as far as the papers, with the exception of the FT and Gaming Weekly, were concerned. So in terms of the value of the deal, it's chicken feed. So that's where we are. I think somebody's cheekily suggested that Clearlake should buy out Todd Boehly, and Todd Boehly then use that money to go and buy Everton from Farhad Moshiri, which would be an interesting set of circumstances. But does Todd Boehly have the funds? He might not have the cash to do it, but he certainly is the contact book. So I don't think that should prevent a deal. Both parties seem to think that there is money to be made out of Chelsea. And when we had that conversation with Andy Payne last week, he was talking about the metaverse and how bullish investors in the United States are with regards to alternative ways of, horrible phrase this, but I'm using, consuming the product. Ways that we as legacy fans don't want to engage with, but there's another generation of people who A, are willing to do it, and B, are willing to pay for it as well. So they both see that there could be some form of financial benefits. In terms of Clearlake Capital's time frame, they certainly are not looking at 25 years. Todd Boehly has got time on his side because it's a trophy asset. And I know wealthy people who own racehorses, and they say, I'll have it, the race, it'll run for 8-10 years. Probably won't make any money of it. Might do, might not, but I'm under no pressure. It's something to do. It's an opportunity. One of my mates goes to Goodwood every year to see his horses run. I've got another mate that goes to Chester and so on. And I say, when you win, is that something to celebrate? And he goes, no. He showed me how much the vets' fees were and the trainers' fees and so on.
Oh yeah.
You're not covering anything at all. You might just pay for the petrol to get to the race course and back. So it's not a financial issue. In the third area, inseparable. Sometimes we think we've fallen in love with somebody when actually we've not really done our homework on them, and there's plenty of relationships that don't last very long. When perhaps initially you thought that, yes, there were one or two differences, but we can work our way around those, and we've got an alternative aim.
Hang on a second, Kieran. I didn't like the way you looked me in the eyes when you said that. Is there something you want to tell me?
I've not been talking to Justin Morehouse on it.
If any of your friends ever need company on their trip to Goodwood or Chester, let me know, Kieran. It's one day when the lottery numbers come out, it's my one great sporting ambition left is to... and it won't be at Goodwood or Chester level, it'll be at Southall or Lingfield, but one day I'll have a little tiny horse of my own running in 5 furlong races. I've already got the colours sorted out, Kieran, don't worry.
I thought you might.
You'd be amazed how many red and blue striped colours are already taken. So I'm having to think outside the box. Every now and again I'll drift off and Ali will go, and you're designing your horse colours again, aren't you? Go, yeah, I am done. Well, or she said, it's Palace's new away kit. And I said, yeah, when I own Palace and horses. Villa, as we discussed, Kieran, Villa are making some money out of Europe, which is quite handy because Europe wants some of that money back.
Yes, UEFA have introduced their FSR, which is different to our PSR. FSR is financial and sustainability rules. And all clubs that are competing within European competition had a deadline, I think it was the 30th of June, to submit financial information. And Villa didn't do it. And Villa now have been fined, I think it's around about €200,000. Wonder how many seats that will buy at Villa Park. Not many at current prices, to be fair. So I don't think it reflects very well on the club. If they want to say, look, we're doing all we can as far as you're concerned as fans, but we're having to pass on this to qualify for PSR, and at the same time they've had to go and pay UEFA 200 grand or whatever it's going to be, and it's not the biggest fine. Roma have been fined, I think, €2 million for a much more serious breach of those particular rules. But it does show that, at least on a European basis, UEFA I think does mean business. I'm not quite sure what the position of the Premier League is at present. They're still moaning about the Leicester ruling. And I was privileged enough to see our very good friend Nick DeMarco yesterday at the House of Lords, where he was giving a talk, and I was there. I was the equivalent of the kid in the back row of school, as you would expect. And that was very good. I've not been to the House of Lords committee rooms before, and it was quite good fun. I did see a few MPs. I was hoping to see Nigel Farage, but I presume he was in Clacton, busy, engaging with his constituents. So didn't.
I would have thought so. Yeah, Nigel Farage. Don't forget Kieran Farage. Yeah,
Farage,
I imagine he would have been up all night in his looking after local constituency issues. Yeah. It's one of those buildings, Kieran. Ken Livingstone took my dad for a tour.
Oh, wow.
And I tagged along. It's supposed to be the other way around, but it's one of those buildings that I genuinely think everybody in the country before the age of 11 should be invited to go and see. It's where our parliament is based. And it's absolutely, whatever your views on politics, whether you're totally apathetic or whether you're party political, it's an amazing place to go. And I just think every kid from everywhere in the country should get the opportunity to go and visit it, because it's very beautiful, but it's fascinating as well. How was Nick DeMarco? Was he lighting cigars with £5 notes? Was he?
Nick was on good form. He was looking at issues in relation to the regulator, and he gave his views. I think there was a robust difference of opinion between some of the parties, but it was interesting that people could listen to each other and debate it as adults, as opposed to some of sort of the Punch and Judy reactions that we've seen in relation to the football regulator coming from senior people in the game.
Now you've mentioned it, Kieran, and we talked, didn't we, about the fact that it was, we talked about the Premier League drawing up the rules. It will be a legal company doing it on their behalf. Whether we call this a loophole or not, will it now be rapidly slammed shut at a rate of knots? Will they be looking to make sure that never happens again?
Well, it depends on the approach that they take, because I've always said that it's the equivalent of doing whack-a-mole. If you're just going to stick a sticking plaster over one particular rule, which has shown itself to be weak in the sense that whatever the intent was, it's not being advanced through the actual wording of the rules. I'm a great believer in stress testing things. You don't get into an aircraft unless it's been tested in advance. And I know I've said this before. When the rules came out, I spent one evening writing down 10 schemes where I thought this will be a coach and horses. And I just stuck that in a drawer, and since then I've just been ticking it off. Now, I'm not being falsely modest here, Kevin. I'm a teacher, okay? I'm good at what I teach, but I'm just a teacher. And I'm thinking, well, if I could do that, then the brightest brains in finance that work in Canary Wharf, that work for these big consultancies, they'll be able to run rings around the rules in their current form. And that's the position that we currently have. So if the Premier League just addresses this particular issue, then I can already work out ways of getting around it. So I think they should take a look at their existing rule book, get somebody to seriously stress test it, and then come up with a better set of rules. But at present, I think they've become a bit of a laughingstock. You've got the Leicester issue, you've got Chelsea with regards to properties, you've got the position of the women's team at Chelsea as well, and a variety of other bonkers things that why we're Nottingham Forest, who had just been promoted, not allowed to spend the same amount of money as other clubs who've been in the Premier League for a number of years. That when you're trying to establish yourself in the Premier League. So the rules in their present form need a very serious review.
We spoke last week as well, Kieran, about how strange it is that in recent weeks we've actually praised UEFA, and in particular their away ticket price caps. But it turns out that not everybody was as happy with that decision as we were.
Yes, this came from reading our, again, friend of the show, Matt Slater, his column in The Athletic. And I'm not surprised at this. When the issue of a price cap for away fans was first mooted, and ultimately it does have to be signed off by the clubs and the leagues, I think it's fair to say that the Premier League was sniffy with regards to it, but there were some people moaning more than others, and by all accounts, moaner-in-chief was Daniel Levy at Spurs. And if you actually take a look, charging €60 in the Champions League for an away ticket, given that you're dealing with people who have travelled, couple of thousand miles, have had to go and pay for accommodation in London. €60 still isn't cheap.
Yeah.
And there is a limit, of course, on the number of away fans who will attend. But I think this, once again, is indicative of the mentality of club owners, is that they just want football fans to empty their wallets and have no broader regard for the fact that you probably will be able to go and sell all of those tickets at Spurs for €80 or €100. But what you'll do is you will disenfranchise the away fans who make the noise. You'll disenfranchise the away fans that create the atmosphere. And the Premier League and UEFA and all of the football authorities, when it was during COVID, they were trilling away, football without fans is nothing, and that's why we're continuing to play. And we watched those matches, and let's face it, they weren't great to watch. We've often said it, but we now genuinely realise the importance of fans at football. And you think about all of the wonderful things that clubs did, and clubs deserve a lot of credit, even the fact clubs that we've been critical of recently, the likes of Spurs and the likes of Manchester United and so on, they were doing wonderful things in their community. And then all those fans, and this didn't happen at my local Italian restaurant, and it didn't happen at my local laundrette, and it didn't happen at my local pub. You got fans who had paid for their season tickets who said to the club, keep the money, even though there was a legal obligation. All of that's been forgotten by Daniel Levy and the other owners who are now objecting, because this is 2024, COVID was 2021, you've done your bit, now sod off.
I meant to say earlier, Kieran, by the way, you're not just a teacher. No one's just a teacher in the same way that no one's just a nurse. And talking of friends of the show, it brings us to Martin Calladine, Kieran, a fantastic journalist and author who we've spoken to a couple of times, who I like to think is he's kind of our cryptocurrency counter espionage man, basically. He's the one who brings us a lot of information about how crypto's working. And this story, Kieran, I think, and I'm very rarely right on these things, but I predict that this story is one that is going to grow. And I think it's going to grow to the extent where something's going to give, because there are so many fans of Premier League clubs in particular who are having worries about this. And this, Wolves, Forest, Palace, and now Fulham. And Martin Calladine has done some undercover work on their new sponsor, and it raises issues that's being raised at several clubs, as I say. And I think this is, I'm going to guess by the end of the year, this story is going to reach tipping point, Kieran. It will either disappear completely, or there are going to be 4 or 5 Premier League clubs lacking shirt sponsors.
Well, yes, this is in respect of Fulham. This is in respect of Fulham's official CFD trading partner. Now, I would imagine that probably 95% of the population of this country, at least, don't know what CFD stands for. And therefore, they probably think, well, if I don't know what it stands for, I probably don't need a trading partner.
Well, obviously, Kieran, on behalf of those people, Kieran, because you and I know clearly, but let's just ask on behalf of those idiots out there, what the fuck is CFD? What is it, Kieran?
It is a contract for difference. Now, this isn't gambling.
Oh, that's CFD.
That's CFD, exactly.
That one, yeah.
So a contract for difference is where you speculate. I won't use the word invest, I will use the word speculate on what is going to happen to the price of a cryptocurrency compared to the value of a currency in future months. It is a very, very high risk form of investment. And I loathe using the word investment in respect to this, because this is gambling with a small g. And the reason why I say it's very, very high risk is that if I bet on Brighton to lose this weekend at home to Ipswich, and I stick on a tenner, and Brighton win or draw, I lose a tenner. With CFDs, if I put £1,000 and I get it wrong, I could end up owing IUX or whoever the other party is to this deal £5,000, £10,000, £20,000, because it's one of those scenarios where you are in a situation where your losses can exceed your initial investment. So it's a very, very high risk strategy. This is an organisation called IUX, which I've never heard of. most people have never heard of. It's based in a place which is held in very high regard as far as the world of finance is concerned. St. Vincent in the Caribbean. When you think of Wall Street, you think of Canary Wharf, you think of number 14 East Street, St. Vincent. And it doesn't have a physical office there. That's where its license is effectively granted. It's actually got a physical presence in Cyprus. As somebody that has taught in Cyprus for many, many years, Cyprus is a very, very good place for money laundering. I'm not saying this has anything to do with this, but I used to teach there, and I used to teach an awful lot of people from Belarus, from Azerbaijan, from Russia, because that's how it rocks. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It was the EU's go-to place for people from the former Russian areas who wanted to do things. So that's sort of a bit intriguing. And what Martin has done is Martin has said, let's take a closer look at IUX. And it turns out that all 10 profiles of people who are claiming to work for IUX in the US and the UK were fake, and they were created in the same month.
Sorry, profiles on where, Kieran? Sorry?
Profiles on LinkedIn, I think it was. It's got no identifiable senior executives, and its name's press contacts appear to be, we will, if somebody from IUX wants from the press office would like to have a chat with us, we'll quite happily be put right. The press contacts don't appear to exist. It claims to have no staff in the UK and is not targeting UK customers. Yet until 2023, its website claimed that it was founded and based and regulated in the UK. And you go through this list that Martin has created, and it simply does not reflect very well. So what have Fulham done? Fulham has said, oh, there's a large amount of money. Thanks very much. Stick it in our bank account. End of story. To be fair to the Fulham Supporters Trust, they brought it to the attention of the club. They say, we are suffering reputational damage. Are IUX targeting people in the UK on this? Probably no more than BJ88 or Net88. Yeah, they're not interested in your money, Kevin, or other people. But they are targeting the Far East market, the African market, markets which have far less regulation than UK, Europe, perhaps the US, because there's money to be made, because there's people to be turned over, because there's people to be exploited. Fulham have previously had a company called Titan, who were also involved in this particular area of the world of finance in CFDs. And that deal got mysteriously cancelled when things started to unravel. I think that was in 2022. Fulham, by all accounts, have done their homework. So, again, if somebody from the Fulham press office wants to say, look, you got this completely wrong, we will hold our hands up. But Martin's an investigative journalist, just like Matt Slater, and there's many other, David Hellier. The fact that we are picking up these stories, that's indicative of the way that the football industry has changed, because the only people that used to report on football were the guys who were saying, oh, well, in the 74th minute, he brought on Billy Bloggs as a substitute, and he made a difference. So football has become big business in its own right, and these guys do a sterling job.
Or when Gareth Southgate was manager, he brought on Billy Bloggs in the 93rd minute and made no difference whatsoever. That expression you use, Kieran, reputational damage, this is one of the reasons why I think these stories will either disappear or will blow up big time, is that it seems to me that fans increasingly are the ones that are more aware and concerned about reputational damage than clubs are. I don't know one Palace fan who says, I don't care what Net88 do, as long as they're paying us £6 million a year, I'm happy. I don't think I'd meet many Fulham fans who would say the same thing about IUX, or Bournemouth fans about BJ88. I just think it's interesting that clubs who sell the heritage of the team, who say Fulham are one of the most historical teams, and quite rightly so, who talk about the cottage and talk about the history of the club, and quite rightly so, seem to forget that when it comes to signing these deals. And I just, as a traditional football fan, as somebody who loves the history of football, the fact that Fulham are doing it, the fact that Fulham are charging so much money for tickets, and that Fulham are getting in bed with these sponsors, makes me somehow even more disappointed, because I know Fulham fans, and it's one of those, you walk through Bishop's Park to a Fulham game, it's one of those you think, football might be changing, but it's not changing that much, because look at this the walk to Craven Cottage is one of the greatest joys in football. But if you're walking towards it now and it's covered with that, it just disappoints me, Kieran. Our final story, Kieran, is a club much smaller than we've been talking about, and it's a story we only mentioned in passing a couple of months ago, but unfortunately it's gone downhill very quickly, and it takes us, Kieran, to Ireland.
Yes, this is in respect of Dundalk, who were the champions of the Irish League as recently as 2019. Fair to say they're not having a good season. They're currently bottom of the table. I think 7 matches to go. They were acquired by a new owner, Brian Ainscough, in December 2023, and wages haven't been paid for August. And we are, the 10th of September. It says they'll be paid in the coming days. Now, I remember when Uncle Terry used to do his collections round, and people would often claim, well, we'll pay you in the coming days, Uncle Terry. He's not a cynical man, but he didn't always believe them. And this is a cause for concern. The club lost €1 million in 2023. The new owner, who's been there less than 12 months, is already looking to sell. I think fans are trying to do a GoFundMe to pay the wages. And again, this wouldn't happen in every other industry. And you look at the amazing efforts from people from Scunthorpe and Tranmere and Wigan and Derby, the fans who Palace. I remember when Palace were in administration and you all rallied round and you raised funds. That's one of the reasons why we're proud to be football fans, because I think we do have a sense of the greater good at these times. Who's going to put money into Irish football? The national team isn't great. All of the focus in Ireland is on what's happening in England and the law of the Premier League in particular, Celtic and so on. So if you're losing €1 million a year, it's a very, very difficult situation from which you can U-turn out of. And you've also got to ask, surely you should have done your homework before you bought the club under these circumstances.
It's interesting, Kieran. I mean, we always say, we'd love to hear from Fulham, we'd love to hear from Villa. I'm far more interested to hear from Dundalk, to be perfectly honest, and from their fans. So if anybody on either side wants to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. Watching the Ireland-England game on Saturday, Kieran, it was noticeable how many times the commentary team referred to the financial difficulties of the FAI. In particular, they were talking about the profile of the new Irish manager and saying, well, their kind of hands are tied because they can't afford the biggest names in Europe, and the biggest names in Europe aren't going to come to manage a national side, where the FA has been investigated on an ongoing basis. So there clearly are issues with football at the highest level in the Republic. But would Dundalk, Kieran, be a full-time professional team? Would they be semi-professional?
I'll be honest, I'm not certain if they are full-time. Certainly some of the clubs have, I think one of the Irish clubs has actually qualified for conference. So, that is transformational. It's the equivalent of National League, I suspect, with full and part-time.
Well, if anybody from Dundalk wants to get in touch, well, listen out for the website, which will come in a minute. Get in touch with us there. So thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution, that'd be very kind of you as well. It would get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And as I said, we are looking at other ways of rewarding our lovely, loyal Patreon fans. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter X. You can find us on YouTube as well. Our book is out now, Unfit and Improper Persons, in paperback. And you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. I've already had photographs of it being in various shops, so that's lovely to know. Feels quite grown up, Kieran, to have a hardback and a paperback copy. I don't know why. I won't say I was walking a bit more sprightly, Kieran, because I'm not. I'm practicing for a 63-mile walk, so all walking is being done at a slower pace at the moment. We will be back on Tuesday with that questions pod. By the way, remember, if you want to text Kevin, Kevin, all in big letters, to 70560 to help me raise money on that 63-mile walk around every football ground in London next week in aid of the Lily Foundation. That would be very kind of you. If you text Kevin, you donate a tenner. But if you text Kevin 20, Kevin 50, guess what? you donate that amount of money. And if you're a high-powered, maybe if you're some kind of high-powered KC, Kieran, who's just had a massive success with a Premier League football club, you might even like to make that figure even higher. I don't know, Kieran. Who knows? We'll be back with our questions pod on Tuesday. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you for all the support of the show. If you want to come along and see us in person, October the 17th, we are playing in Balham at the Cheerful Earful Comedy Podcast Festival. So we're looking forward to that. We'll be chatting before and after the show as well, as well as the usual. And it's the opportunity to not have to wait 8 months to get a question answered as well, which is surely worth the admission price. It's by itself. There's another way that you can support the show, and that's to give us a review. It helps us in the charts, helps us with algorithms when we are trying to book guests. God knows what they must think when they read our reviews, because they tend to be quite similar. But it doesn't matter what you say. And you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Zsa Gabor and Grumpy from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I think that would be quite an interesting show.
That was a left field one, Kieran.
That was suggested by one of our reviewers. So it shows that I do read the reviews.
It's a cracker. Yes. I don't know how you'd set the chairs up, but that's a really good one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.